And now we come to Thor, probably the riskiest move in Marvel's Phase 1 of the MCU. While Iron Man works very well within the realm of realism, while the Hulk was based on a known property, Marvel's version of Thor had to somehow fit in with the universe that the company was trying to build. This meant trying to make sure it didn't seem too silly or fantastical and made sense within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think they pulled it off very well. The biggest thing that Marvel had to try to sell to audiences was that their take on Norse mythology was able to fit in with the other characters in the MCU. It had to make sense that one day Thor would be able to share the screen with Hulk and Iron Man and Captain America. By bringing in a Shakespeare nerd like Kenneth Branagh to direct, you get someone who can really indulge in the royal drama and deception of Odin, Thor, and Loki. And it's these moments on Asgard that really play into the strengths of Kenneth Branagh, where you get sibling rivalry, betrayal for the throne, and a rich understanding of royal politics and Norse mythology. While the film doesn't go super deep into the royal family side of things, you get the feeling that they were Kenneth Branagh's favourite moments to bring to life. This is also what makes going back to this film a lot of fun, especially when you compare this film to where Thor ends up in Thor Ragnarok. They are vastly different approaches to the character, but I think it's important to note that this film and Branagh taking the material seriously were what created the building blocks to Thor Ragnarok, although Thor 2 certainly didn't help. This film of course made Chris Hemsworth the movie star that we all now know him to be. Obviously he'd broken into Hollywood with J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek film, but this movie is what brought him to the attention of the world. And I think the Avengers is what cemented Chris as Thor for years to come. There is definitely a great introduction to him as the character in this first film. Chris does play a more stoic and serious Thor in this film than the more comedic take we see later on in Thor Ragnarok. But we definitely get some moments in this film where Chris Hemsworth's charm and sense of humour do come into play a bit, and while he can definitely get outshone sometimes by powerhouse actors like Anthony Hopkins, Chris Hemsworth is still able to hold his own in this film, and he has definitely improved as an actor over the years. The movie also introduced us to Tom Hiddleston's Loki, which in this film is much like the Loki we see in Norse mythology, compared to the anti-hero version of Loki that we see in the other Thor films. Here we get the backstory of Loki, including his history with the Frost Giants and him trying to prove he's better than his brother. It is nice to see Thor and Loki acting as brothers in this film and getting along in the first act, although we all know that Loki is going to turn into a villain at some point and eventually reveal his master plan. I will admit that Tom Hiddleston is underutilized here much more than I thought so, as it's really the Avengers that cemented him as the best villain that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has given us. Here he is more the brother who's jealous of his sibling trying to steal the throne from his father. It's all very Shakespearean and Kenneth Branagh handles it wonderfully. The movie does take a dip however when we start going to Earth, and while all the stuff on Earth is handled much better here than it is in Thor 2, it's still very much the lesser half of this film. The movie just unfortunately starts to feel a bit more generic here. The non-existent chemistry between Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman doesn't really help either. Of all the roles in the MCU that should have been recast, it was probably Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. Not to mention that this is the first time we get the Kat Dennings character. Nothing against Kat, the character is just overly annoying comic relief, although she is dialed back a bit in this film than in The Dark World. Stellan Skarsgård is fine, I mean he's a great actor, his character is just kind of there to be the fact checker and voice of science. The thing that I really love about this film however is how they explain that the Asgardians are higher beings with super advanced technology, and that when they originally came to Earth they were just interpreted as deities, and their version of science was just interpreted as magic. I've always thought that this was the best way to ground the Norse mythology stuff, and it's the route that I was kind of hoping that DC and Wonder Woman would have taken with explaining the Greek gods in that film. Thor does start to involve more references to Iron Man and the Hulk, as this was where the universe was really building towards the Avengers. This film does take place around the same time as Iron Man 2, so you get the SHIELD connection with Phil Coulson returning and having a much bigger role this time around than in previous Marvel films. We get a very brief introduction to Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye as a little tease for the Avengers, while the post-credit scene in this film directly sets up the Avengers while also teasing Captain America. While the Avengers setup isn't as in-your-face as Iron Man 2, it can still be a little bit on the nose or for the sake of an Easter egg. The other supporting cast are quite good in this film, with a lot of faces that ended up going on to bigger things like Idris Elba as Heimdall and Jamie Alexander as Lady Sif. As a film that introduces Thor into the Marvel Universe, it does its job. I think he definitely becomes more vital and interesting come the time of the Avengers. The film does underutilize some elements like the Frost Giants, even if they are intended to be a red herring. The third act does feel a little bit rushed with the Destroyer, and quickly trying to set up the final showdown between Thor and Loki. If things had been a bit better paced, I think the impact of Thor and Jane not being able to connect with each other would have had a bigger impact. The film does have some really beautiful shots, but some of the big sweeping CG shots have definitely aged. The The music, as many people online have noted, is fairly generic in this first Thor film, which thankfully is improved by the time Thor Ragnarok came around. As a film that intended to ground Thor within the Marvel Universe, the God of Thunder's first outing is still a hell of a lot of fun, even if we know the best of the character is still yet to come in the MCU. Thor gets a 7 out of 10 from me. Guys, I hope you liked this review. If you did like this review, look forward to more MCU films leading up to the release of Avengers Infinity War. Next will be Captain America: The First Avengers. So stay right here for your mono fix. Bye guys.